Your medication is about to be confiscated. Not because it's illegal, not because you did anything wrong, because a rule changed in 2026 that almost nobody told you about. And the item sitting in your carry-on right now, the one your doctor prescribed, the one you depend on every single day, no longer looks the way the system expects it to look. A 69-year-old retired school principal from Phoenix had been flying with the same blood pressure medication for 11 years. Same prescription, same pharmacy, same bottle. She'd passed through security hundreds of times without a single issue. At Phoenix Sky Harbor in January 2026, a TSA officer held up her medication, examined the label for 40 seconds, and told her the bottle was being flagged for secondary screening. She stood at the checkpoint for 31 minutes while 2 officers consulted a supervisor. She made her flight by 4 minutes. Her medication was returned, but the officer told her, unprompted as she was leaving, that if she'd had one more bottle in her bag, they would have confiscated both. She had no idea what rule she'd nearly violated. Neither do most travelers. After reviewing TSA's updated 22-6 medication screening guidelines, cross-referencing them with documented traveler complaints filed with the Department of Transportation, and speaking with 2 pharmacists who regularly counsel patients on international travel preparation, what emerged is this: the rules governing what medications you can carry, how they must be packaged, what documentation makes them instantly credible to a scanner and an officer, and what happens when any one of those conditions isn't met. These rules changed significantly in the past 18 months. And the travelers most affected are not first-time flyers who don't know the system. They are experienced, confident, medically dependent travelers over 50 who flew with these medications under the old rules and assumed the old rules still applied. 5 specific medication categories are being flagged, held, and in some cases confiscated at checkpoints in 2026 at rates significantly higher than previous years. Number 3 on this list is the one causing the most confusion, and the one where a single sentence spoken to a TSA officer changes everything. Let's fix this before your next flight. Medication 1. Liquid medications above 3.4 ounces without proper declaration. Most travelers over 50 know the 3.4-ounce liquid rule. Most travelers over 50 also know, or believe they know, that medical liquids are exempt from that rule. Both of those things are true. The problem is the gap between knowing the exemption exists and knowing exactly how to activate it at the checkpoint. Here is what the exemption actually requires in 2006. Medical liquids, including prescription cough syrup, liquid antibiotics, oral insulin, liquid chemotherapy support medications, and prescription liquid supplements, are permitted in quantities exceeding 3.4 ounces. But the exemption does not activate automatically. It activates when you declare the items before the screening process begins, when you separate them from your regular toiletry liquids, and when you present them in a way that allows visual verification. A 72-year-old retired nurse from Seattle carried a 6-ounce bottle of prescription cough syrup on a flight to visit her daughter. She'd been prescribed it 2 weeks earlier for a respiratory infection, and the prescription ran for 30 days. She placed it in her toiletry quart bag alongside her shampoo and moisturizer, and said nothing at the checkpoint. The scanner flagged the unusual volume in her liquids bag. The officer pulled the entire bag. The prescription bottle was examined, questioned, and the officer called a supervisor. In the 12 minutes that followed, the officer confirmed the medication was legitimate, but told her that the placement of a declared medical liquid inside a standard toiletry bag without declaration was itself the trigger. Had she separated it and declared it before the bin went through the scanner, the interaction would have taken 15 seconds. Here's what you do. Every medical liquid you are carrying, regardless of size, regardless of whether it is prescription or over-the-counter, goes in a separate clear pouch, completely apart from your regular toiletry bag. When you reach the screening lane, pull that pouch out separately the same way you pull out your laptop. Before the bin goes through the scanner, say directly to the officer, "I have medical liquids in this pouch that are declared and exempt from the volume limit." That sentence, those 15 words, activates the exemption protocol and converts a potential 12-minute interrogation into a 30-second visual check. Hide them. You trigger a flag. Declare them. You fly through. The rule has not changed. The enforcement of it has. Medication 2. Controlled substances without original pharmacy labeling. Opioid pain medications. Benzodiazepines for anxiety or sleep. Stimulants for attention disorders. Sleep medications classified as Schedule IV controlled substances. These are the medications most likely to be confiscated in 2026 when the packaging does not meet the standard that the screening system and the officer at the checkpoint are now trained to require. Original pharmacy bottle, your name on the label, the prescribing physician's name, the pharmacy name and address, the date filled, the exact medication name and dosage. Every single one of those elements must be on the label for a controlled substance to move through a 2026 checkpoint without triggering a secondary review. Here is the mistake that is costing travelers their medications at checkpoints across the country right now. Pill organizers, weekly medication organizers, travel-sized containers, any format other than the original pharmacy bottle. For domestic flights within the United States, the TSA does not technically require that controlled substances be in their original pharmacy container. Legally, a pill organizer is allowed. Operationally, in 2026, a pill organizer containing what appears to be a controlled substance creates an immediate uncertainty that the officer at the checkpoint is now trained to resolve through secondary screening rather than visual inspection. The distinction between what is technically permitted and what moves through a checkpoint quickly in practice has widened significantly this year. A 64-year-old retired architect from Chicago traveled with his Xanax in a Monday through Sunday pill organizer that he'd used for 6 years because it helped him manage his weekly doses, alongside 3 other medications. At O'Hare, the organizer was flagged. The officer could see pills that appeared to be controlled substances with no identifying label. Secondary screening. Supervisor consultation. He provided the original prescription bottle name from memory. The officer had no way to verify the connection between the pills in the organizer and the prescription he was describing verbally. He was allowed to proceed only after a 40-minute process that involved a phone call to the TSA's medical assistance line. His medication was not confiscated, but the 40 minutes it cost him on a connecting itinerary changed the outcome of his travel day completely. Here is what you do. Controlled substances fly in their original pharmacy bottles. Every trip. Every time. No exceptions for convenience, for space, for weight. The original bottle is your proof. Without it, the burden of verifying your medication falls entirely on a checkpoint officer who has 40 other passengers waiting behind you and no mechanism to confirm your prescription on the spot. If you need a weekly pill organizer for your own medication management at home, which is a completely reasonable thing, pack the organizer in your checked bag and carry the original bottles in your carry-on. When you arrive at your destination, transfer what you need for the week. Your convenience at the hotel does not outweigh your right to carry your medication through security without a 40-minute interrogation. The magic phrase, if you are ever questioned about a controlled substance at a checkpoint, this is a legally prescribed controlled substance. I have the original pharmacy label, and I can provide the prescribing physician's contact information if that's needed for verification. That sentence signals immediate competence. It tells the officer that you understand the framework, you have the documentation, and you are prepared to cooperate through proper channels. It diffuses the uncertainty in seconds. Medication 3. Injectable medications without accompanying supplies documentation. This is the one causing the most confusion at checkpoints in 2026. And it is the one where a single sentence to a TSA officer changes everything. Injectable medications, insulin, biologic therapies for autoimmune conditions, GLP, 1 agonists for diabetes and weight management, blood thinners administered by injection, are permitted in carry-on baggage. The syringes, needles, lancets, and auto-injector devices that accompany them are also permitted. This has been TSA policy for years. What has changed in 2026 is the scrutiny applied to the relationship between the injectable medication and the delivery devices when they are not presented together as a matched set. An insulin vial traveling in one compartment of a carry-on bag and an insulin syringe traveling in a toiletry kit in another compartment of the same bag creates a scanning anomaly that triggers a flag. The scanner sees an injectable medication in one location and a syringe in another location and cannot confirm the connection between them. Both items are legal. Both items are permitted. The separation of them from each other is what generates the secondary review. A 67-year-old retired teacher from Atlanta managed her type 1 diabetes with multiple daily injections. She had been doing this for 31 years. She packed her insulin in a dedicated cold pouch in the main compartment of her carry-on, and her syringes in her toiletry kit in the front pocket. At Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson, the scanner flagged her bag for a secondary hand search. The officer found the insulin and the syringes in separate locations and initiated a protocol that required her to demonstrate the connection between the medication and the delivery device. She did not have her prescription documentation in a readily accessible location. It was in her checked bag. The secondary search took 28 minutes and required a supervisor sign-off. She made her flight. Barely. Here is what you do. Injectable medications and their delivery devices travel together, in the same pouch, in the same section of your carry-on, visible to the scanner as a matched set. You also carry, in your carry-on, not your checked bag, a letter from your prescribing physician, an official letterhead that identifies your condition, names the medication, specifies that injection delivery is medically required, and confirms that the syringes and needles are prescribed medical equipment. This letter costs one phone call to your doctor's office and takes under 5 minutes to request. Most physicians' offices can produce it same day or next day. It is the single document that resolves every checkpoint complication for injectable medication travelers before the complication has time to develop. When you reach the security lane, pull the medication pouch out and place it in the bin separately, the same way you handle your laptop. Say to the officer, "I have injectable medication and prescribed needles in this pouch. I have a physician's letter confirming the prescription if you need it." That sentence and that letter end the conversation before it starts. Medication 4. Medications in foreign language packaging or internationally purchased packaging. This one affects a specific and growing category of traveler, people who live internationally for part of the year, people who purchase medications abroad because they are significantly less expensive, and people who travel with medications they obtained in another country during a previous trip. The medication itself may be chemically identical to what is sold in the United States under a different brand name. The active compound may be the same. The dosage may be the same. The problem is that the packaging does not say what a TSA officer in 2026 is trained to expect it to say. Foreign language labels, international brand names. International pharmacy labeling formats. All of these create the visual uncertainty that the updated 2026 screening protocols are specifically designed to address with secondary review rather than assumption. A 71-year-old retired professor from New York purchased a 3-month supply of his blood pressure medication in Mexico during an extended stay because the cost was a fraction of what he paid in the US, and the medication was identical. Same active compound, same manufacturer, different brand name and Spanish language label. At JFK, on his return, the medication was flagged. The officer could not match the label to any recognizable format in the verification database used at that checkpoint. Secondary screening. Supervisor. A 52-minute process that involved the officer photographing the medication and consulting with a pharmaceutical verification database. The medication was eventually returned. He was told that on his next trip, he needed documentation connecting the international packaging to his US prescription. Here is what you do. If you carry any medication in packaging that does not match US pharmacy labeling standards, including medications purchased internationally, medications in travel-sized containers filled from larger bottles at home, or medications in any container other than the original US pharmacy dispenser, carry a physician's letter identifying the medication by its generic chemical name, not its brand name. The generic chemical name is the same in every country. Amlodipine is amlodipine in the United States, Mexico, the United Kingdom, and every other country. A letter stating that you are prescribed a specific generic compound at a specific dosage bridges the gap between international packaging and US checkpoint expectations in a way that no amount of explanation at the counter can. Photograph the packaging of every medication you carry before your trip and store those photographs in a cloud folder accessible from your phone. If an officer needs to verify what you're carrying, showing them the photograph alongside your physician's letter gives them 2 independent sources of confirmation. Medication 5. Large quantities of medication that exceed a standard prescription supply. TSA has no formal limit on how much medication a traveler can carry. That is the technically accurate statement. The operationally accurate statement in 2026 is considerably more complicated. Carrying more than a 30-day supply of any prescription medication, particularly controlled substances, injectable medications, or medications in the same class as frequently misused drugs, now routinely triggers a secondary review at major checkpoints. The officer's evaluation is not based on a written rule that says 30 days is the limit. It is based on a proportionality assessment that is part of the updated 2026 screening training. A 90-day supply of a blood pressure medication for a 10-day trip generates a proportionality flag that a 14-day supply for the same trip does not. A 65-year-old retired attorney from Dallas was flying to Europe for a 3-week trip and carried a 90-day supply of her anxiety medication because her psychiatrist recommended the buffer in case of travel disruption, lost luggage, or extended stay. At Dallas-Fort Worth, the quantity triggered a secondary review. The officer did not confiscate the medication, but the supervisor who reviewed the secondary screening told her explicitly that without a physician's letter explaining the medical rationale for carrying a 90-day supply on a 21-day trip, a different officer on a different day might have made a different decision. She asked what she should have brought. The supervisor told her a letter from the prescribing physician stating the medical reason for carrying a supply that exceeds the trip duration. Here is what you do. For any trip where you are carrying more than a 30-day supply of any prescription medication, carry a physician's letter that specifically addresses the quantity. The letter should state your name, the medication name, the prescribed dosage, and the medical rationale for the quantity being carried, whether that is the physician's recommendation for a supply buffer, management of a chronic condition requiring consistent access, or the unavailability of the medication at your destination. That letter is your explanation delivered by the only voice that carries authority at a checkpoint, your doctors. If you are heading somewhere, take 2 seconds and hit the like button now. This is the information that should be in every pre-travel appointment with every physician who treats patients over 60, and it almost never is. Here is what you do. For any trip where you are carrying more than a 30-day supply of any prescription medication, carry a physician's letter that specifically addresses the quantity. The letter should state your name, the medication name, the prescribed dosage, and the medical rationale for the quantity being carried, whether that is the physician's recommendation for a supply buffer, management of a chronic condition requiring consistent access, or the unavailability of the medication at your destination. That letter is your explanation delivered by the only voice that carries authority at a checkpoint, your doctors. If you are heading somewhere, take 2 seconds and hit the like button now. This is the information that should be in every pre-travel appointment with every physician who treats patients over 60, and it almost never is.